begin. The speaker who will be moving up to the other podium is Chandra Ewing. Please.
Thank you. So good evening. My name is Samuel Sinyangwe, co-founder of Campaign Zero, a national organization focused on police accountability. We have launched the first comprehensive review of police union contracts around the country in the 100 largest cities. Of the 81 cities where we got their police union contracts, Austin was in the group of 6 cities that had the least accountable contract in the country. And let me go into why. Austin's police union contract, as you've discussed a little bit earlier, the 180-day rule, allowing officers to escape accountability because of a mere technicality about how long that investigation took place or when the police chief was notified of it. We've seen provisions in this contract that do a number of other things that are harmful for police accountability at a time when so many people are feeling unsafe because of police interactions that they've had or that they've witnessed. We see in this contract through the enabling of the citizens' oversight structure that it limits the structure to not having subpoena power, not having the power to discipline officers. These are powers that civilian review boards across the country have, whether it's in San Francisco or in Oakland. Atlanta has the power to subpoena officers. We have Miami-Dade has the power to subpoena officers. So many civilian review boards and structures have this power, and yet in this contract it actually prohibits the Citizens Oversight Board from having that power. We see in this contract the erasure and reduction of evidence of misconduct, whether it is evidence of suspensions, 1, 2, or 3 days, reducing the written reprimand and preventing the public from having access to them. Altogether, we looked at 6 different categories and ways in which police union contracts can be harmful to and undermine police accountability, and Austin had all 6 of those issues. So I'm here today to talk about what an alternative could be, where instead of spending $80 million over 5 years on a police union contract to increase benefits and pay to a police department that is already the highest paid of any other department in the state, you have an opportunity to be a leader in this space of standing up for police accountability and transparency and demanding something better. Demanding that Austin lead, not only in terms of accountability, not only in terms of civilian oversight, but also leading in terms of understanding what the priorities are and how best to achieve them. If the priority is safety, the research literature is quite clear that the best approach to achieving that is not investing more in police. A study from Patrick Sharkey just came out that showed that every 10 additional nonprofit organizations, community organizations working on community safety, were correlated with a 9% reduction in the murder rate and a 6% reduction in the violent crime rate. With that $80 million, you could invest $800,000 in 20 organizations over that 5-year window. That would have a substantially higher impact on public safety than investing that money in a police union contract that is still unaccountable.
Alderwoman, you have donated time for Matt Wallace. Is Matt Wallace here? Okay, you have an additional minute.
Thank you. Wonderful.
What are your names?
Amanda Mills.
Amanda Mills?
Yes.
Okay.
Just her.
All right, you have 2 more minutes.
Great. So as I was saying, this is an opportunity to lead. Number 1, to lead in terms of achieving public safety in an evidence-based fashion that invests in community approaches, that invests in mental health response and substance abuse prevention, that invests in crisis intervention, and that does not invest and continue to expand an approach that frankly is not as driven by data and actually what works. Second, when we talk about civilian oversight, we looked at many of the changes that were proposed here that we just heard, and so many of them are just small compared to what we've seen so many other cities do. When you look at the data on community oversight, we talk about the need to have this Citizens Oversight Board, but that board is so ineffective and powerless that it really does not add value to the current situation. When you look at the data, 170 complaints of police misconduct were levied in 2015, the most recent year available. And we found that only 7% of those complaints were sustained. And of those, only 3 complaints resulted in a suspension of the officer. Out of the 170 complaints, less than 2%. Now, obviously, 170 is probably a severe undercount because of how difficult it is to actually file a complaint. So what we see is a structure that has been created that actually does not achieve the goal of independently investigating, does not have the power to subpoena, does not have the power to actually ensure a transparent and accountable process that is civilian-driven to ensure accountability. And so you really have a few options here. One, it could be to really push back on this current negotiated contract and demand a contract that is a leader in the space, a contract that is accountable, the most accountable contract in the country, that not only removes the problematic provisions, but ensures a civilian oversight process that can lead this country in terms of power, in terms of the power that invests in community to get to the truth about what happened and ensure that accountability happens as a result of police misconduct. You have the option of leading in terms of how you shift investment away from ineffective approaches and into community-based responses.
Run out of time. Somebody else want to donate a minute to him? What's your name?
Wonderful.
I'm sorry?
He said Emil Fliegen-Pearl.
Okay. Could you come down to the clerk to make sure she has your name? Go ahead. One more minute.
Sure. And finally, you have the power to join an emerging movement of cities across this country that for the first time is standing up and saying that we're going to hold the line and we're going to demand an accountable police department with the hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars that you are spending on this department. Citizens deserve nothing less. You can actually join a movement that started with San Antonio, where for the first time you had a non-unanimous vote on a police union contract reauthorization. You have cities like Portland, where they actually successfully removed provisions in the contract that established that 48-hour rule, that delay in actually getting to the truth of what's happening in an incident of misconduct. They removed that because they were serious about accountability. You're seeing in cities like Chicago now, where the city council, the board of aldermen, has said that they will not vote to approve a contract unless all of the types of provisions that are problematic are removed. And here you have Austin, where you can actually go much further and be a leader in this country for police accountability, for standing up for the most marginalized and impacted citizens and demanding an investment in what works. Thank you.
Mr. McKesson, did you have time donated to you?
I don't know. I think I'll be good with 3 minutes.
3 minutes? All right.
Cool.
You're on.
So I'm DeRay McKesson. I'm a national activist and a co-founder of Campaign Zero, an organization that is centered on solutions around police violence and accountability. Like Sam already talked about, we did the first ever public analysis of police union contracts around the country. And I'll just talk about a few things. Is one, that we believe in safety. We believe that communities should be safe, that when people go out, they should know that they can come home. We also believe in accountability, that there will be standards and there should be consequences when people don't meet those standards. And we also believe in a justice system that is fair and equitable. The challenge with this contract and with this police department right now is that it doesn't actually have a justice system that is fair. So we think about what it means that there's a different set of rules that the police play by. So we think about three things specifically. One is the 180-day requirement. Is right now, the proposal would mean that would be waived for criminal complaints or criminal proceedings. But when you think about things that aren't criminal, so if a police officer pulls their gun and points it at somebody, if they call them the N-word or another slur, like that wouldn't actually be changed under this. So we know from the Me Too movement that just because a victim doesn't come forward immediately or in 180 days, that doesn't mean that there wasn't something wrong with that. The second is we think about this contract right now allows the police to have access to investigation material before they're interrogated. There's no other public body or proceeding where somebody gets access to all the investigation materials against them before they're ever interrogated. That's not a fair system. That's not something any private citizen would ever benefit from. And there's no understanding of how that actually allows the police to do their job any better. And the third is about citizen oversight. And like Sam already talked about, it's like, what does it mean to have a citizen oversight board that actually has no structural power, that can only at best make recommendations, that has no subpoena power or discipline power? And we know that there's civilian oversight boards across the country that do have those things. So we think about like teachers, for instance, when we think about the importance of standards for teachers, this isn't about being against teachers. It's about saying that we think that kids should have great educations. This isn't about being anti-police. This is about making sure that there is standards and there are standards in community that hold people accountable. I've never been a doctor before, but I know what hospitals should look like. I know what doctors and what care should look like. I've never been a police officer, and I understand the role is hard. I also know that there shouldn't be a different set of rules that the police get to play by. And this contract sets you up, if you vote against it right now, to do something that is remarkable. I was a chief human capital in the Baltimore City school system. I managed our contracts in the human capital office. a department that is as big as the Austin Public Schools. And I say that because I know that the negotiating table, sometimes you have a chance to change history and change the course of a department, and you have that right now. You have a chance to do something that will put you on par and make you a leader in this space that has a structural power to make sure that the police are actually held accountable in real ways. And I think that if you don't vote for this contract, then you are sending a message that you believe that there should be real teeth, that there should be something in this contract that is meaty. And I think that that is a standard bearer. As Sam already talked about, there are cities across the country that have done this, and we would love for you to be one of the cities that joins that team. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Walter Moreau. And then at the next podium here will be Bino Cardenas.
Walter Moreau, the director at Foundation Communities. My concern with the contract is really...
And you have time donated to you? Is
No,
Brad?
I don't need it.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Big concern is can we afford it? I think you all know this is the big budget decision that bakes in for 5 years the biggest expense that you've got. I think I speak for many other human social service agencies in Austin that work on job training, mental health services, victim services, substance abuse programs. We don't pitch ourselves as crime prevention programs, but we have that impact. Usually at budget time, we're here scrambling around looking for funds. I'm proud to say at this budget time, you were able to find $100,000 that helped us with health insurance enrollment. We've got 2 days left. We've enrolled 4,400 folks. We're trying to get 5,000 folks enrolled. You might not think that's crime prevention, but when those 5,000 folks have access to health services for chronic disease management, for mental health, for substance abuse, it reduces first responder demands on police and other responses. Whatever you end up negotiating, that cost that gets baked in, it impacts health and human services, parks, libraries, environmental protection, property tax, everything else that y'all care about. That's my main message.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Councilmember Alter.
Hi, my name is Ranjana Natraj, and I direct the Civil Rights Clinic at UT Law School. My students and I looked into civilian oversight into policing, delved deep, and here's what we found. It's pretty well established that civilian oversight of policing is critical for public safety, for racial justice, for economic justice. So what makes civilian oversight effective? You need at least a couple of things. The first thing is you have to have investigative powers for the civilians who are doing the oversight. Here's why civilian oversight is unique. It's the only people who are outside the police system and outside the city system who are truly independent and can oversee the police. And so when they are overseeing the police, they have to be able to subpoena and get all the data that they need. Data access is critical to actually looking and doing the oversight. If you can't get the data, you can't do oversight. We've found that across the country, when civilian panels have subpoena powers, they get the data. They rarely have to use the subpoena powers, but the fact that it's there is critical to getting the data they need to do investigations. Second, they usually have investigators. So civilian review boards have investigators who are separate from internal affairs investigators in order to independently investigate critical incidents as well as pattern and practices. So what civilian oversight panels can do is, and they've done this in Portland and New York, they can figure out how are our search policies, how are our investigative stop policies. They can look at patterns and problems outside of incidents. Our civilian review panel has done some great things here and has made some great recommendations to the chief. It would be great to get responses from the chief, but what we should be doing is being on the trajectory to strengthening civilian oversight, and that's what this new contract doesn't do. Once you finish investigating, you got to have more mechanisms for accountability. So the civilian panel has to have the ability to make recommendations, not just in a small subset of cases, but in all cases and in all patterns where they see problematic policing. And that's what gets us closer to what the Matrix report recommended, which is community policing and building trust, but also what we know is right, which is more effective policing, which is policing that doesn't sacrifice safety or racial justice or economic justice in order to produce particular public safety outcomes. So I'll stop with that. And the last thing I'll say is civilian oversight has even produced great insights into taser policies, pepper spraying. They can get down and dirty into the details of policing if we give them the powers to do it. Thank you.